What if you could load up an MMO and just enjoy the game?
For the Horde.
What if quests in an MMO didn't just suck?
What do you need, Dabu?
That's essentially what Ashes of Creation is asking with their story arc system. The in-development MMO showed off their story arc system recently with a dense video with some very interesting scenes, like the one shown off as they start a story arc chapter here.
Oh, things are getting red.
But what is a story arc system? Well, this is what the team themselves said about the story arc system.
It's helpful, I think, to think about story arcs as kind of like a prepackaged tabletop campaign. They contain like all of the NPCs and quests and monsters, like all the things you need to make a cool fantasy story.
Essentially, it's the Ashes team's answer for the lack of quest hubs in the game. For anyone unfamiliar with Ashes of Creation, it's built upon a node system, meaning you, the players, will be creating much of the world yourself through leveling up of nodes, creating your own cities, and even by the sound of it, your own narratives. Story arcs sound a lot more like dynamic quests in other MMOs, but on a much larger scale and as the heart of questing in this game, unlike, say, static quests in other games. Or perhaps on a smaller scale. If you remember the Cataclysm in World of Warcraft, you can think of how quests change with the world change. Well, in Ashes of Creation, the world will be changing based on your decisions as a server. So the state of the world will be dictated by the story arcs, as they say in this video. It's like the world decides in the state that it's in that we're now going to play this module. The dynamism is further illustrated by another quote from the video.
So one of the things that I find most unique about our story arc system is that they're intended to represent change within the story of what Vera is telling. And we don't just do that through these new quest logs and dialogue, but also by literally changing the environments and showing these active states that represent what is happening and what choices the players have made previously in the different chapters, perhaps.
Now, before we get too off track here, I want to point out that they were very clear that these are not procedurally generated quests and world changes and things like that. They wrote all the dialogue, they made the narrative story beats. These are just things that will happen at different rates depending on what decisions you make. And that some things may be changed based on what you decide, as a server anyway. But how could it actually play out? Well, story arcs work out in chapters or phases. These can cause changes across the entire server, including changing environments, monsters, NPCs, quests, and pathways or roads. These chapters have their own time frames and cannot be brute forced to complete faster than by just having more people grind them. Perhaps coolest of all, and what makes this system interesting to me, is that story arcs can branch into different stories with multiple possible endings depending on player choice during each chapter. And what sounds truly remarkable and interesting to me is to do this on a large scale. The server will be taking aggregates of the choices made by players to decide what will happen in later phases of the story arc. For example, helping one NPC could lock you out of helping another NPC. This isn't exactly unique. Different MMOs have fiddled with all of the sorts of dynamic events and questing in the past, but what I think is so interesting about how this will work in Ashes of Creation is the ability to shape the world, which seems to be a very key part of the game, coming right down to the node system. Now, of course, Ashes of Creation will need to make sure to balance rewards to avoid min-max guides, deciding which options are best, and thus minimizing choice or change. But that's something that I'm sure that they'll be working on, and something that they actually noted in one of their forum posts. Of note here is that yes, large guilds having power and sway is a feature of Ashes of Creation and will of course impact story arcs, but they will also be working as hard as possible to balance rewards when there are branches to avoid one branch being viewed as the best for loot. Story arcs will range in size, with some of them being large enough that they will occur once, though they can be replayed, but will not have the same interactive world impact, while others will be available on cooldowns of varying degrees. Let's take a look at one of the story arcs that we've seen from Ashes of Creation, the one that was available in the video in March, to get an idea of what you can expect. At least for me, this showed a greater depth of story and left me more excited for Ashes of Creation from a PvE perspective than I had been previously. The Blood Still Dew takes place in the Riverlands when a village has reached stage 3. This occurs at the Tower of Carfin, where the remnants of a terrible curse lingers. A desperate spell cast during the Harbinger Apocalypse when the Ancients were advancing towards the Aelan capital to slow their advance. This tower, the Tower of Carfin, was strategically placed and known for its magical prowess. As the story arc progresses, we see remnants of the spell above the tower, blood seeps from the walls, and the bridge opens towards the tower, covered in a thick weave of what looks a lot like veins. New enemies appear to block your way. The environment itself is corrupted by the use of blood magic, the kind of story that might conjure some interesting memories for fans of the Dragon Age RPG series. For others, one might see this tower and remember the winding story behind the Tower of Frozen Shadow in EverQuest. The story arc has an intriguing and suitably dark story, and the world shows it wonderfully. Suffice it to say, the story arc system shows that Ashes of Creation hopes to be a lot more than just a PvP sandbox game. But why is this better? Why is it better than the quest hubs of World of Warcraft that work as a function of the game and have been emulated by many games in the over and over? Besides the dynamism and the active role you can play in the world, which is obviously a huge part of it, I wanted to point out one of the points in the forum post specifically. These systems are story and lore first. They interface with other systems for sure, but they aren't the best way to gain experience, gold, or character power. This is where I think many MMOs post World of Warcraft in 2004 got incredibly lazy. The quest hub style of play became the norm. You go from this spot to this spot to this spot. And before people get on me about games like Elder Scrolls Online and Guild Wars 2, those still have a lot of remnants of that system. Yes, even the heart system, that still works a bit like a quest hub because you're still congregating in one area and following those quests, and that's the main source of experience. Not to mention, personal story quests and things like that. While it may be more organic questing than having a gigantic quest marker above my head, you still have this quest marker above your head, so is it that different? Having other things that are more valuable to you beyond questing, I think, is a wonderful departure from the norm. If you enjoy the quest hub style of MMOs, that's fantastic. You have a ton of options. But something that's a little bit different, that's a bit more rare, and it's something I'm happy to see that Ashes of Creation seems to be going towards. Now granted, we are still in alpha, so a lot of this could still change, but at least that's my read on it. But it's not just having a questing system that isn't the soul or meta way to level that made me make a video on this subject. It's the player influence on the world, being able to make choices not as a chosen one archetype, but just as an MMORPG player, as just someone else in the world. Choices that lend themselves to both personal and larger narratives, as well as potentially having greater server-wide impacts. It makes questing itself fun, not just for filling out your experience bar, because it makes you more engaged on the server. I've played many MMOs, and several have handled questing differently. EverQuest, ironically given its name, had very few quests when it launched, and it was far from the best way to get experience. They later adapted to offer different things like faction experience or, well, very notably, epic items, but grinding and being part of the world was always paramount. In Star Wars The Old Republic, they introduced player choice, which was fantastic, but they did so in a way that had no server-wide function. Your player choice was your RPG, deciding if you were good or evil or somewhere in between. In later years, they tried to expand this out a little bit with the dark side and light side points, which did have server-wide impact, but may have been a bit too little too late. I can imagine a system like this at launch being very interesting. But this was also a very binary choice, which left it severely limited. And then you had games like World of Warcraft, which focused on quests as its means of carrying you through zones and leveling. Sure, there were alternatives at different points like dungeons and even PvP, but anyone who's played World of Warcraft for a few years has seen the nerfs to other types of experience, RIP pet battle experience. And they will tell you that quest experience in WoW is still the meta. What Ashes of Creation is offering is what sounds like a middle ground. A personal narrative, but not a chosen one story. Rewards, but not the end all or be all. They have timers, but not so strict that they verge into the daily territory. It's been a few weeks since this explainer video came out, but honestly, it's one of the best ones I've seen from Ashes, and I found myself getting really into the story. I wanted to know more. I wanted to uncover the secrets of the curse and see what choices may come as the story arc progresses. For the sake of a bit of fun, let's say that you are approaching this tower. You enter the tower, you get to the top, and you have a choice to make. You can either end the curse, the blood magic curse, but you will get no reward. Or you could take a reward, but let the curse spread. Which one would you pick? My name is Redbeard Flynn. Thank you so much for watching. I previously covered the node system, which is kind of like a bedrock system of Ashes of Creation. So if you have no idea what it is, I would recommend taking a look at this video right here, which will give you the basics of the system and give you an idea of what the game is about. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.